Welcome to South Central Regional Library's Safe Within Your Walls programming, supported by Safe at Home Manitoba. My name is Angela Lovell and I'm the admin at Manitou branch of the library. And I am today pleased to welcome artist, illustrator, author Justin Currie as our special guest. Welcome, Justin.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Justin grew up very close by in Pilot Mound and is the owner of Chasing Artworks, a Winnipeg illustration studio whose clients include Disney, Adobe, Netflix, and Marvel Studios. He has also illustrated and published several books, including graphic novels Cassie and Tonk, which was a Manitoba Book Awards winner, Rust and Water, and his latest, Dragon Nanny. So Justin, what inspired you to become an artist and an illustrator?
Oh man, okay. So when I was growing up, I was okay at sports and I was okay at school, but I wasn't the best. But where I seemed to excel was drawing and Lego. I seemed to do better most when it came to those two things. So I really kept at them. I still play Lego today, every now and then. And I kept drawing all through high school. And when I graduated high school, I really wanted to keep drawing because that's where I seemed to be excelling and getting the most praise. But drawing as a career was something it's really hard to do. It was tricky. So the next best thing for me was to take graphic design, which is still creative and still has illustrative components, but it's a little more professional and you can get a full-time job with it relatively easy compared to drawing full-time. So I moved to Winnipeg and I enrolled at Red River Graphic Design, and I was trained with Adobe Photoshop and Illustrator and InDesign. And what it did was it taught me how to take my drawings and doodles from the sketchbook and bring them into the computer, and it taught me all these new skills and tools and ways I could illustrate things. So suddenly it wasn't as much of a hobby, it was starting to look more professional. And so after a couple of years of really honing my design and illustration skills, I started to get hired and work as a professional illustrator, which led to me being hired by a video game company. So I got to work in video games for a couple of years. But the entire time I was still working on my own illustrative projects on the side. So in 2014, I quit my full-time job at a video game company, which young Justin Currie would be very upset hearing that I quit a job as a concept artist. But I quit my job and I started my own studio called Chasing Artwork. And that's when I published my very first book, Cassie and Tonk. And I've been illustrating full-time, running my own company since. So it's long-winded answer of kind of what kind of led up to me being here. So.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah. So now I understand too that you've developed a very unique artistic style, and I believe you call it shattered vector painting. Is that correct?
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I call it that because I'm using Adobe Illustrator, which is primarily a graphic design program. So it's got, the name is not very appropriate for the program because no illustrators use Adobe Illustrator. It's mostly for logos and brochures and websites. It's a very rigid program. But I had to use it as a graphic designer. I had to work in it every day, all day. And so I started to experiment around in this program to use it as something a little more freeform, a little more illustrative. And that's where I came up with this shattered glass style that I call shattered vector painting. And it's all because of that graphic design training kind of combining with my traditional illustration and just experimenting around with the program. So it's also given me quite a leg up in the illustration community because not many people use this program, and so this style is fairly unique. And yeah, so it's 100% because I was trained as a graphic designer. And when I'm asked by young illustrators like what would they recommend as far as helping their path as to being a professional illustrator, I always recommend graphic design. That program did nothing but give me a leg up in the illustration profession.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to ask you now a little bit about your new book, Dragon Nanny.
Yeah.
Can you tell us, share with us what the book is about and where the inspiration for the book came from?
Absolutely. Okay. So Dragon Nanny is my newest book, came out in November. So it's only like two months old. And it was my first Kickstarter book. So normally my books are funded and distributed through comic conventions and book touring and school visits and stuff like that. But of course, in 2019, 2020, that kind of, or yeah, more 2020, that all kind of got put on hold because of the pandemic. So I didn't have access to the crowds of people at conventions in various cities. So I went to Kickstarter, and I brought my crowds to Kickstarter to say, if you want my new book, here's I can do that. And with Kickstarter, the way it works is it's a crowd of people. You kind of explain your project. So I explained the book. I had finished about 70% of the book already, and I showed them a bunch of it and said, if you want the book to happen, you have to you pre-order it. So I had hundreds of people pre-order the book before it existed, before it was a real printed thing. And we sold enough books that we were able to print it in actually Altona. Altona has Friesen's Printing, which is a fantastic printing press. I use them for pretty much all my books. And we were able to make Dragon Nanny a thing. Dragon Nanny, the idea came from, actually, I'll show you. There's a blank page at the front, which comes with a custom sketch and a signature. So almost every single book has a different sketch in that front page. And when I was touring around with Rust and Water, one of the characters that kept showing up was a robot with noodly arms, and he was holding a dragon. And I usually tour around with the writer who worked on the book as well. And so this combination of the dragon and the robot let us draw half and half. So I would draw the robot and he would draw the creature it was holding, usually a dragon, or vice versa. And so we had a lot of fun always doodling the same character. And just somewhere along the way, we started to imagine what the relationship was there. Did this, robot find an abandoned dragon? Did he steal it from its mom? What's the story? And then he was always kind of cylinder shaped. And so I love the idea that maybe his chest opened up and he could incubate the dragons. He hatched them. And so once we had that idea, we kind of started snowballing with that. Okay, so why is this robot searching for dragon eggs and hatching them? Like, why aren't the adult dragons hatching their eggs? So then we, started snowballing with that. And once I kind of have a bit of a rough idea, I go into my sketchbook and I do what's called a storyboard. I just very quickly, roughly sketch everything out and try to tell the whole story as just like a movie, how I imagine it in my head. And the first couple versions were very different from what ended up being in the book, but you kind of retell the story again and again and again until it all fits together nicely and it reads nicely. So when I started working on it, the way I've worked on most of my books with a writer is I tell the entire story visually. I don't have any words to go with it. We just know what the story is. And so I tell it completely with pictures. And the goal the entire time with this book was I wanted to tell the story so well visually that we wouldn't need very many words in it. So Dragon Nanny does not, it's a 100-page graphic novel, but there's very, very little writing in it. It's mostly a visual story. And that was my goal from the get-go. I wanted to get rid of as many words as possible, which also makes it a little tougher on the writer. It's harder to tell a story in few words. It's easy to tell it with lots of words. So Gregory Kmichuk did a very good job with his part as well. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's a wonderful book. It's got a very topical sort of storyline to it too, right? About, possibly a world that has, gone a little bit wrong, a little bit awry, and there's some lessons in there too, aren't there? There's some messages about the current state of maybe our environment or our world today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I think with all the stories that I've worked on, I never want to write a story that beats the reader over the head with stuff like that. But I love the implied narrative and just kind of the world building that yeah, you can really come up with a lot of your own backstory. We never explain what happened to all the. It's a planet that no longer has any adult dragons, so these baby dragons are left dormant in their eggs and not able to be hatched. And we have no idea what happened to the last generation of dragons. And that was kind of the intention. We never wanted to explain it. We wanted to leave it to the reader, to the viewer, to kind of come up with in their own mind maybe what happened. Some of my favorite movies always do that. They're wrapped in this huge mystery that as much as you want it explained, if they explained it, it would never be as good as keeping it a mystery.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay.
Yeah.
So do you have any tips for any budding young artists who might be watching this video that you could share?
Yeah. I grew up on a farm actually in between Lager and Pilot Mound. So, a pretty rural community. Not too many artists around. But as I got older and I started to meet more and more artists, and then when I started traveling to all these conventions and going to really big cities with lots and lots of artists and becoming friends with some incredibly talented artists, I kind of started to see some repeating trends of what made successful, professional artists. And it always came down to it's just practice, practice, practice. The people who are successful and doing really well are the ones who are drawing and working nonstop. It doesn't matter what college you went to, what pencils or computer software you use. It's the ones who are always practicing and always developing their skills that are at the head of the pack. So I always, my number one recommendation to anybody really in any discipline, it's all about the practice. It's all about the mileage. The more you put into it, the more you're going to get out. So yeah, to know that, there's not a secret program out there that if you took it, you're going to be a success. It's really, if you practice a lot, you're going to get better. And if you practice more than the next guy, you're going to probably be better than that.
So, Justin, I think you're going to share with us a little bit about how you put together Dragon Nanny, how you sort of constructed some of the imagery. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Wonderful. I'll let you take that away.
Okay, so right now I'm scrolling through the Dragon Nanny book as it was in the middle of July. So the print didn't book the book didn't print until October, so there was still quite a bit to do at this point. But I just kind of wanted to show how things are built and how I work a little bit. So here we see some of the left-hand page is fairly close to being finished, whereas the right-hand page, you see that terrible little sketch there. That's my rough storyboard. That's how the story is told in its first couple versions. It's just really rough little sketches just to kind of get an idea of how the story is going to go. And then usually, to make things a little easier on myself, I concentrate on just the characters themselves before the background. So you see the nanny here without any backgrounds, just himself. And that's just so I'm making sure I'm happy with how the characters emoting and looking before I add in the background and finish the full painting. Here you can see that as well. I really wanted to concentrate on the two characters themselves before I got the backgrounds in. And this is just kind of helping me work a little faster and get a little more of the book done before coming in for all the small details. You can see in a lot of the panels, the nanny's arms don't have shading or the little white strips on them anymore, and no backgrounds at all. And here, some very rough backgrounds are plopped in. The rocks are just rough shapes. And again, it's just to kind of, I'm just working with my actors almost before getting the rest of the scene in. And here's another one of those rough sketches before the scene itself gets put in. And then this is a better example of a finished page. So, but it all starts with those really rough sketches, then the characters without backgrounds, and even the words here. This is just me plopping in words. None of the words were ready at this point, but it's just me experimenting with how the words might look. So yeah. I think it's when I thought about making books, I kind of expected everybody, you start with page 1 and you work until the page is done, or work until the book is done, but that's not the case at all. I jump around quite a bit. Once I kind of figure out exactly how the book is going to look, I'll start with scenes that are going to be the easiest, and once those are done, it kind of cements the style of the book and the look of the characters and the feel of everything, and then that kind of helps with the more difficult scenes. And some days I'm just tired of drawing deserts and I want to move to the greener scene. So if I've spent too much time with one kind of look, then I'll move on to another look. Some days I really want to draw waterfalls, so I'll move on to the waterfall scenes. But yeah, you kind of, I jumped around quite a bit, just kind of getting, working on what made the most sense to me. And eventually, yeah, it's just like a puzzle. You work on more and more, and you figure out pieces and pieces, and more of it comes together. And this is a good example. This is that rough storyboarding that I place into the computer before I do the final paintings. So you can see it's all done with really rough sketches, and that's kind of how you figure out how the story is going to go. And none of this has been seen before. This is all like original storyboards that didn't end up in the book at all. And yeah, and then that's the end.
That's really cool. Thanks, Justin. Thank you for sharing that with us.
No problem. There we go. And
great. Well, thank you, Justin. It's been great talking to you. And thank you so much for being here. I just wanted to ask, are you working on any new projects right now?
Yeah, yeah. I never have. I don't think I'll ever be able to get done everything that I want to get done. I have so many stories that I want to tell and books I want to make. Right now, I'm working on a really big Pokemon themed piece, which I'm pretty excited about. And after that, I'm going to be doing another Kickstarter that I'm not exactly sure what the launch date will be, but this one's going to be kind of video game and fantasy themed. It'll be a big grand adventure with a couple of characters. And it's going to really tie into, I also really like video games growing up, and I still do. So I wanted to do something in that vein. So yeah, I don't really have a firm title or an idea of exactly when that'll be ready yet, but after, I think probably around April, I'll be announcing details of that book and when exactly it's going to go live and will be available for ordering. So yeah.
Super. Wonderful. Well, thank you again. And we will be including a link to Justin's website, chasingartwork.com, at the end of the video. And there you can find more information about Justin and where to purchase his books. And we also want to tell you to watch out for a second video with Justin, who has agreed to share some art tips with us. And he's going to be actually showing you how to draw a dragon-themed character. There's going to be a bit of a tutorial so that you can draw along with Justin. So we hope you'll keep an eye open for that one. And as I said, we thank you again, Justin, and thank you all for joining us for this Safe at Home Manitoba presentation. Stay safe within your walls.
Thanks for having me.